Welcome to Take These Chains Daily Maintenance. Today is Wednesday, May 14th, 2014. Coming to you today from Chicago, riding along in the traffic in a big truck. Our title today is called The Prime of Life, or rather, The Fleeting Prime of Life. We are making our first recording today using a YouTube video, experimenting with that as we may be able to save a little money and offer something a little different anyway, instead of the former way of doing things through either Blog Talk Radio or through SoundCloud. Our key verses today come from the book of Ecclesiastes in the Old Testament, Ecclesiastes 11:9 and 11:10, and they read, "Rejoice, young man, during your childhood, and let your heart be pleasant during the days of your young manhood, and follow the impulses of your heart and the desires of your eyes. Yet know that God will bring you to judgment for all these things." And in verse 10, "So remove grief and anger from your heart, and put away pain from your body, because childhood and the prime of life are fleeting." A short excerpt today from Matthew Henry's concise commentary. It says, "Life is sweet to bad men, because they have their portion in this life. It is sweet to good men, because it is the time of preparation for a better. It is sweet to all. Here is a caution to think of death, even when life is most sweet. Solomon makes an affecting address to young persons. They would desire opportunity to pursue every pleasure. Then follow your desires, but be assured that God will call you into judgment." Again from Matthew Henry's concise commentary. These verses are so encouraging and speak of freedom, and yet intellectually, with freedom comes responsibility. I understand that with freedom comes responsibility. Responsibility is congruent with morality. The founding fathers of our nation that we call home stated that an immoral people were incapable of governing themselves. I think they were right on the money there. I think they knew this. It's true. The results of immorality in our culture have certainly become manifest. It's not difficult to see that. Indeed, it appears that we as a people are perhaps not capable of governing ourselves. This void, of course, being filled with the exponential growth of governing officials. We as a people are not unique in this situation, and as a people in this nation, we're not unique in it as well. There's other nations throughout the world that are facing the same situation. The Old Testament, though, is full of accounts of the failures of the ancient Israelites. We are so much like them in so many ways. It's interesting to compare. Out of the book of Psalms, Psalm 39:5, "Behold, you have made my days as handbreadths, and my lifetime is nothing in your sight. Surely every man at his best is a mere breath." Selah. This little book of poetry called Ecclesiastes was written by Solomon as he was looking back on his life somewhere around 935 BC. He was an older man, and I can kind of relate looking back on my life as well. So I really enjoy the book of Ecclesiastes. As many of us have done, he lived much of his life apart from God. An excerpt here to kind of introduce this thought, this concept, comes from the Life Application Study Bible. And it says, "The chocolate bunny lies in the basket surrounded by green paper grass. With Easter morning, eyes wide open with anticipation, the little boy carefully lifts the candy figure and bites into one of the long ears. But the sweet taste fades quickly, and the child looks again at the candy in his hand. It's hollow." We've all experienced that, I think. I remember being disappointed as a young one when that would happen. "Empty, futile, hollow, nothing." The words have a ring of disappointment and disillusionment. Yet, this is the life experience of many, grasping the sweet things, possessions, experience, power, and pleasure. They find nothing inside. Empty, hollow, futile, nothing. Grasping the sweet things, the alleged sweet things, possessions, power, and pleasure. Really, they're hollow. I remember this past Easter I went to see the grandkids, and 4 grandsons all in one family, and of course they all got their hollow chocolate Easter bunnies. And then one of the adults brought out his solid chocolate Easter bunny, and us adults enjoyed that. So that was not fair, but it was what we did. Anyway, Solomon advises us to enjoy our lives. Seems interesting. He advises us to enjoy our lives, especially in our youthfulness, and let our hearts be pleasant in our young adulthood. Now that says a lot. Enjoy our lives, especially in our youthfulness, and then let our hearts be pleasant in our young adulthood. We think about that. What does that mean exactly? Enjoying ourselves when we're young, and then we have no guilt, no condemnation, no baggage, skeletons in our closet if we've done well in our youthfulness, and then our hearts can be pleasant in our young adulthood. Yet how many of us live within the boundaries of sinful behavior, which in turn cause things to become quite unpleasant? Well, I'm one of them. Lamentations 3:27. It is good for a man that he should bear the yoke in his youth. And what that really says, it sounds probably worse, bearing a yoke, meaning like a ox or something, but that's really not quite what we're getting at here. It really means the willingness to come under God's discipline and learn from it. Back to Ecclesiastes, we're going to go to a different chapter, chapter 12, verse 1. Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come and the years draw near, when you will say, I have no delight in them. Have you met anybody like that, who became older and just had no delight in their life at all? Just really hard to be around somebody like that. It's really sad. What is life lived apart from God? Lonely? Is it lonely apart from God? Is it hopeless? No purpose? When you were young, you were enticed by exciting things. I certainly was, and I certainly see a lot of young people being enticed by more exciting things. When I was young, a roller coaster seemed like it was fun. Really enjoyed that, but not so much now. The problem with being young, however, is that it's easy to focus your life on things which seem fun without much regard to things of eternal value. I think when you're young, you like to do things you'd love to do, and you don't really think of the consequences or if there's any eternal value in what you do. I think looking back, and I've thought about this quite a bit, when you're young and you're in school and you think, oh, how hard this is, and you just want to play and do things you want to do, and as you get older and teenager, you want to do things you want to do, and you don't really see the value, the long-term value in getting a good education as much as when you get older you appreciate education more, I think, and you wish you would have done more and you could have done more. And that's certainly my case. You know, my youthful, stubborn ways did not get me far. Psalm 81:12 says, So I gave them over to the stubbornness of their heart, to walk in their own devices. You know, do we really want to walk in our own devices? Or be given to the stubbornness of our heart? You know, God, He wants us to learn from the consequences of our sin, the consequences of what we do. If we had no consequences, then we just keep on going on doing what we shouldn't be doing. Jeremiah 7:24 says, Yet they did not obey or incline their ear, but walked in their own counsels and in the stubbornness of their evil heart, and went backward and not forward. Have we done that before? We did not obey or incline our ear, but walk in our own counsels, meaning doing what we want to do, and in the stubbornness of our own evil hearts, stubborn, yes, and went backward. We didn't accomplish anything. We went backward, not forward. That sure rings a bell. Ecclesiastes again. This time we'll do something in chapter 2, verse 10. All that my eyes desired, I did not refuse them. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure, for my heart was pleased because of all my labor, and this was my reward for all my labor. Solomon is saying in Ecclesiastes that everything he wanted, he didn't refuse himself. He had the wherewithal financially and the ability to have whatever he wanted, and he didn't withhold anything from any pleasure. For he thought, anyway, his heart was pleased because of all his labor, and this was his reward for all his labor. Well, of course, then later he goes on to refute that. An excerpt from J. Vernon McGee says, "Your youthful days are empty if they are not lived right." That's simple enough. Your youthful days are empty if they're not lived right. Life is a gift that is given to us by God, given one day at a time. In fact, 1 second at a time. It's a precious gift. It is to be used for the glory of God. What is the chief end of man? The chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. Ecclesiastes 12:1. I think we already did this, but we'll do it again. Ecclesiastes 12:1 says, "Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come and the years draw near, when you will say, I have no delight in them." Nothing in this world can really satisfy our hearts. Think about it, it would be fun to have an expensive exotic car or a really beautiful large home. Not that those things are evil in any way, but to covet after them, that's the problem. Nothing in this world can really satisfy our hearts. If you know people that had a lot and wanted a lot more, so nothing in this world can satisfy our hearts. But when we make our decision for God, only then we become truly satisfied. Hopefully, we've learned from the mistakes of our usefulness. Let's look at this from Ephesians. In the New Testament, Ephesians chapter 2, verse 1 to 3. It says, "And when you were dead in your trespasses and sins, in which you formerly walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, and of the spirit that is now working in the sons of disobedience. Among them, we too all formerly lived in the lust of our flesh, indulging the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature children of wrath, even as the rest." That's a mouthful. I suppose we could take those 3 verses and do a whole session on that. But it's talking about back when we were dead in our trespasses and sins, meaning we were not acknowledging God in our lives. We were doing our own thing apart from God, which we formerly walked that way, according to the course of this world, like all the rest of people doing that. According to the prince of power of the air, that means the devil, of the spirit that is now working on the sons of disobedience. Obviously, that's the devil as well. Among them, too, we all formerly lived in the lust of our flesh, indulging the desires of the flesh, and of the mind, and were by nature children of wrath, even as the rest. Talking about the former days before we walked with God. Next excerpt, Life Application Study Bible. Immediately after his prayer, Paul reminds the Ephesians of the reality of personal sin. Like them, we must too, I'll say it again, like them, we must never forget our past, the condition from which Jesus saved us. Those memories are the best fuel for our gratitude to Christ for all He's done in our behalf. Again, that's from the Life Application Study Bible. Ephesians, continuing on, we did chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. Let's do chapter 2, verses 4 through 6. Beginning with 4. "But God, being rich in mercy, because of His great love with which He loved us, even when we were dead in our transgressions, made us alive together with Christ. By grace you've been saved, and raised us up with Him, and seated us with Him in the heavenly places in Christ Jesus." Well, I hope we all fully get a grasp on that. It's so important. God, rich in His mercy, because of His great love, He loved us. Even when we were dead in our transgressions, even when we were awful, He still loved us. And He made us alive together with Christ, so we've been saved by His grace. And raised us up with Him, capital H Him, raised us up with Him, and seated us with Him in the heavenly places in Christ Jesus. Such great love. How patient and tolerant our God is. We should strive to be humble, patient, and tolerant as well, showing compassion on those who we think may be unworthy. How does God see the unlovely? Well, we were there. Another little kind of a sideline to this, following the desires of our eyes, and as Solomon described that previous, Uh, he denied his eyes nothing, denied nothing to himself, following the desires of his eyes. Well, the beginning account of that goes back to the book of Genesis, chapter 3, verse 6, and talking about Eve. It says, "When the woman saw the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and the tree was desirable to make one wise." It's a lot of desires there. "She took from its fruit and ate, and she gave also to her husband with her, and he ate." The original sin, the beginning of the downfall of mankind there. The desire and enticement that led to sin. Not just then, but now. Out of 2 Samuel, let's go to chapter 11, verse 2. Another desire and enticement, so to speak. We're going to talk about David. "Now when evening came, David arose from his bed and walked around to the roof of the king's house. And from the roof he saw a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful in appearance." And since this is family friendly and everything, I'm not going to go into more detail on that account. But the consequences of David's sin, which took place shortly after that, the consequences of his sin, it had led to tragedy in people's lives. And, we'll study more about this at a later time. But one of the things with sin, especially sin of that type of nature, and many sins, it never just affects the person doing it or the person who was the victim of, so to speak, of it. It affects a whole bunch of people that are near you and close to you as well. It's like ripples in the water. It just spreads out. Well, in the book of 1 John, it's such a practical book in so many ways. Some practical advice for all of us to consider before we do something we might regret. 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 through 17. "Do not love the world nor the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, and the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life, is not from the Father, but is from the world. The world is passing away, and also its lust. But the one who does the will of God lives forever." Let's go through that again and kind of break it down. We could do a whole thing on that too. Beginning with 1 John chapter 2, beginning with verse 15. "Do not love the world, nor the things in the world." Well, you can kind of think about that statement for a while. Do not love the world. Does that mean Mother Earth, so to speak, as some would term it? And it could be. It could be just things in this world: houses, cars, possessions, all the things that we like to have. It says, "Do not love the world, nor the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him." And that meaning that if we put our love of things in this life, the love of things in this world above God, that the love of the Father has given to us is not in us. That's what it's saying. "For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, and the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life." Those are the things in the world. Lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life. Pretty much covers it all, doesn't it? It's not from the Father, but it's from the world. This world is passing away. It's dying. Ultimately, there'll be no more, not the way we know of it. And also its lusts. But the one who does the will of God lives forever. Sin leads to death. The one who does the will of God lives forever. Another excerpt from Life Application Study Bible. People often say, "It doesn't matter," but many of a person's choices will be irreversible. They will affect that person for a lifetime. What do you do when you're young? Sorry, say it again. What you do when you're young does matter. Every life now, no, I'm going to start this whole thing over. Kind of bouncing around, my eyeballs are jiggling, so it's kind of hard to focus. But people often say, "It doesn't matter," but many of a person's choices will be irreversible. They will affect that person for a lifetime. I'll stop there, and is that ever true? Choices we make, some of them we can't go back and redo them. They're reversible. They affect you for a lifetime. Some bad choices can really affect you for a lifetime. What you do when you're young does matter. Make your choices well. Uh, uh, Obtain good friends who will come alongside you and support you. Who you hang out with does matter. Just some little tidbits there. Enjoy life now, but don't do anything physically, morally, or spiritually that will prevent you from enjoying life when you're old. Isn't that some good advice? Enjoy yourself when you're young, but don't do physical, moral, or spiritual things that will prevent you from enjoying life when you're old. Physical, I remember one time I was young, some friends, we were at a river, and there's a really high bridge over the river, and a couple of people that were younger than me jumped off it, and I thought that looks like fun. It was way down there. The river was plenty deep, but it was a long jump, and I jumped off the bridge too, and I shattered my back. I mean, completely shattered it. By the grace of God, it healed, and I was able to work, and I didn't become paralyzed. I was paralyzed for a short time, but by the grace of God, I survived it. I'm getting along just fine with it. Stiff every now and then. It has arthritis, but just enough to remind me what you do physically when you're young does matter. Of course, morally and spiritually, I'm not going to go into all that, but yeah, that stuff does matter. And when you're older, it catches up with you. 2 Timothy 2:22 says, "Now flee from youthful lusts and pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace with those who call on the Lord from a pure heart." Let's read that again since I got tongue-tied. 2 Timothy 2:22. "Now flee from youthful lusts and pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace with those who call on the Lord from a pure heart." Again, I think, as I think about this, we go back to when you're young and who you choose your friends. Choose wisely. If you choose good friends and choose wisely and pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace will be with you for those who call on the Lord from a pure heart. Removing ourselves physically from temptation is Removing ourselves physically from temptation is often the way to avoid the spiritual battle which takes place within our hearts when we are about to make choices which separate us from the love of God. You know, we're thinking about doing something we shouldn't do, and the best way to avoid doing things we regret is just to remove ourselves from that situation, remove ourselves from that spiritual battle. We don't want to be separated from the love of God. Well, let's conclude today with a couple of verses from the Psalms. The first one, Psalm 25:7, says, "Do not remember the sins of my youth or my transgressions. According to your loving kindness, remember me for your goodness' sake, O Lord." Of course, that's David speaking. "Do not remember the sins of my youth or my transgressions. According to your loving kindness, remember me for your goodness' sake, O Lord." An excerpt from J. Vernon McGee. David asked God not only to remember his tender mercies and loving kindnesses, but now he asks him to forget something. He says, "Remember not the sins of my youth, forget them." Then he prays to God for goodness and mercy. God is rich in both of these. He has enough for you today, and there will be some left over for me. I don't know about you, but I'm going to need a whole lot of mercy, and I would like to have a lot of goodness too. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. And of course that often quoted verse is from the Psalms, chapter 23, verse 6. That was J. Vernon McGee. I sure like him. He's just so down to earth. Well, finally, in conclusion, let's go to Psalm 39:5. It says, "Behold, you have made my days as handbreadths, and my lifetime is nothing in your sight. Surely every man at his best is a mere breath. Selah." Our days, life goes by so fast. I remember when I was young, and I was probably 7, 6, somewhere in there, and I was talking to my grandma, and it seemed like it was probably July, and I'm thinking about Christmas, and I told Grandma it's a long ways till Christmas. It seemed long to me, but she said, "No, that's not long. Your life goes by very, very fast." And of course, when I was young, I didn't believe that, but she was right. It does. From J. Vernon McGee. He says, this verse ends with the word Selah, and we had that word up above too, so I wanted to define it now. This verse ends with the word Selah. Stop, look, and listen. Think this over, friend. The brevity of human life on this earth ought to tell us something. If this life is all there is to human existence, it is a colossal failure. I'd rather be a dinosaur or a redwood tree and hang around for a while, because compared to them, man's life is just a handbreadth. Well, we have the rest of the features on our website today, as we normally do. One of the fun things where it says, click this for comics. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Today's thing from Adam 4D. Well, I won't read it to you, but it's pretty good. It always is. He's got a kind of a dry sense of humor sometimes. I really enjoy his work. Our verse of the day, which comes from, what is that? Bible Gateway. I couldn't think of it for a minute. Our verse of the day, it's from the Psalms, Psalm 139, 13, and 14. For you formed my inward parts. You wove me in my mother's womb. I will give thanks to you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, and my soul knows it very well. What a fitting verse to conclude with today. And that's it. We are now finished. We have different ways to contact. You feel free to do that. I'd be happy to talk with you. You can do that also on Facebook. Well, that's it. God bless you.